Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Unnecessary Emails.
I hear it when I play it back.
You
I hear it on
updated
my
your
system.
terms of service, have you?
Fucking reason.
Well then, by all means, tell the world. Now, let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Icarus Rush. When terrorists fly too close to the sun, Icarus brings them back to Earth. And the new Chris Cole blockbuster, Icarus Rush. Welcome everyone to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers, actors, do all the things. And we like to review films to see what we can learn about them. And just because we love movies. And we hope that people listening also love movies and like to geek out and spend all of our time discussing those movies. Speaking of movies, what movie are we covering today, movie?
Today we are covering American Psycho. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause the episode, go watch it. We're going to spoil a bunch of stuff, I think.
Yeah, I suppose. We'll look at a handful of things. We'll look at some of the cinematography, the way you light a flat shot, hallway composition that they do early on in the film, as well as look at some of the story and writing, some of the symbolism, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. A wealthy New York City investment banking executive, Patrick Bateman, hides his alternate psychopathic ego from his coworkers and friends as he delves deeper into his violent, hedonistic fantasies. It's directed by Mary Harron. It's based on the novel by Bret, Easton, Ellis. Screenplay by Mary Harron and Guinevere Turner. Cinematography by Andrzej Sekula. It's featuring Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman, Jared Leto as Paul Allen, Chloë Sevigny as Jean, Willem Dafoe as Detective Kimball, Reese Witherspoon as Evelyn, and Cara Seymour as Christie.
I'm fairly certain that Timothy Bryce and Evelyn are having an affair. Timothy is the only interesting person I know. I'm almost completely indifferent as to whether Evelyn knows I'm having an affair with Courtney Rawlinson, her closest friend. Courtney is almost perfect looking. She's usually operating on one or more psychiatric drugs. Tonight, I believe it's Xanax. More disturbing than her drug use, though, is the fact that she's engaged to Louis Carruthers, the biggest doofus in the business.
Tell me, Stash, do you think Soho is becoming too commercial?
Yes, I read that. Oh, who gives a rat's ass?
Hey, that affects us.
Oh, well, what about the massacres in Sri Lanka, honey? Doesn't that affect us too? I mean, do you know anything about Sri Lanka? How, the Sikhs are killing, tons of Israelis over there?
Come on, Bryce. There are a lot more important problems than Sri Lanka to worry about.
Like what?
Well, we have to end apartheid, for one, and slow down the nuclear arms race, stop terrorism, and world hunger. We have to provide food and shelter for the homeless, and oppose racial discrimination, and promote civil rights, while also promoting equal rights for women. We have to encourage a return to traditional moral values. Most importantly, we have to promote general social concern, and less materialism in young people.
Patrick, how thought-provoking.
So, Todd, Patrick Bateman sounds like a good guy. What do you think?
The best, dude. Just the best, dude. There's there's so much to say about his character and about the film in general. I think it's such an iconic film because I think it's what a lot of people have either thought, not themselves, right, but just thought about American society or Wall Street or people like this for a long time, but didn't really know how to say it or put it into a visible performance of some kind. And my God, Christian Bale is just absolutely flawless in this. If you've ever, been driving down the highway and you just think, man, I just want to swerve into the other oncoming lane or something. It's those kinds of crazy thoughts that come into your head manifested in a performance and in a film. And And then taken to, you know, the most extreme level you can think, where this guy actually takes action on a lot of these things, or so we think. And it's just wild. It's a wild exploration into the mind, you know, and the chaoticness of the mind, and how it can really destroy you, or, you know, make you feel like you're more important than you really are. I don't know, that it's amazing. I think that the performance is what stands out for me. There's just nothing behind his eyes, you know, and it's disheartening and scary at the same time. And, but I think that this performance has, influenced a lot of other acting since. That's one thing that I kind of like picked up. It's because I haven't watched this film in a long time. And watching it again makes me think, oh my gosh, I see a lot of what Christian Bale did in performances since then. And I guess I could bring them up. I guess just one being, what's his name's, Antony Starr's performance as Homelander in The Boys is literally, I mean, it's kind of crazy that we're doing this film right now, because I haven't ever watched The Boys until just recently, and I just finished it. And it's straight up, it's like he watched American Psycho and it's like, that's what I'm doing. And he does it flawlessly. And there's other performances too, I feel like, that have modeled after this, but just fantastic. I absolutely adore it. I can see why it's a cult classic.
Yeah, his performance is amazing because there's actually so much nuance in what he's doing. He's putting on the facade, as well as kind of carrying all these little social interactions and wearing it on his face. Like the famous, like there's really only one sequence that I'm familiar with here, which is the business card sequence. And whenever one starts whipping them out, at first, you know, it's like everyone's drawing swords and, you know, putting them on the table, and he's super proud of his. And then as everyone keeps going, you can kind of see him start to get crushed and jealous and envious, and then start to despise people. Like he's wearing all these emotions on his face in this very simple social interaction, but we understand it. We understand exactly what's happening behind the mask. And we also know how petty and absurd it is. Like there's all this comedy that underlies this, even as it's, you know, grotesque, which is a fine line to walk. I mean, I feel like this is the project you and I are working on right now. My short film that, you know, we shot in January, we're working through the score, and it's a fine line to walk, these fantasies and intermixing it with reality. And like, at what point is what's happening on screen actually happening? Which is the interesting part of this film. Like I debate, and I'm curious what your take is. You take everything that the movie says and demonstrates at the very end at face value, that it was all fantasy. He didn't kill anyone. What's your understanding of that?
I mean, it's a good question. I honestly don't know. To me, my gut is to say that it didn't happen, that it was all in his head, that he did the whole thing where, you know, you imagine swerving into oncoming traffic, but it was literally genocide of everyone. And he took taking the obvious route of, who's the first guy he kills? It's Paul Allen. That he knows he in his subconscious knows Paul Allen is in London. And so he takes that opportunity to, in his mind, murder him, and then go on a murdering spree, and allows his mind to just do what it does. And it creates this reality. So we're living in his mind for the duration of the film. That's what it feels like to me. And then at the end, we come out of it. You know, when he's talking to that guy at the end, he's like, "What are you talking about? I just talked to him. He's in London." You know, whatever. So yeah. That's what I take. I don't know. What do you take?
I think that's the most plausible version of this. But there's a part of me that sees another version that,
please,
on the second viewing, I wish I'd watched this another one or two times. There's so much happening. There's so many ways to interpret it, so many moments, that I'm barely scratching the surface. This is going to be, as we were talking before we rolled, this will be our jankiest episode maybe to date, outside of like The Room. Like that was a janky ass episode. But,
I hate that episode. Don't go listen to that episode.
And so part of me wonders if this is obviously a commentary about the excesses of Wall Street. And to me, this is the or maybe the super pro Gordon Gekko version of Oliver Stone's Wall Street. Like, what's really going on? Who are these people really on the inside? They're hollow shells of human beings, and they really only care about themselves. And that's kind of the end of that sentence. Anything that includes other people is only there to elevate themselves, right? They only care who else is in a restaurant because now they're by association on that level. And their whole journey is to climb the social ladder just for the sake of being at the top, not to actually accomplish anything. And that's kind of why I love that clip of him at the restaurant at the beginning of the film, putting on his mask, and saying, we need to be concerned about ending apartheid and sheltering the homeless and feeding them. And then, of course, like almost immediately he walks outside and meets a homeless person, spits in their face effectively, mocks them, and then stabs them to death and stomps their dog. Like, that's what he really thinks. That's who he actually is. It's not all the stuff on the outside that he's pretending to be, the mask. And I'll try to come back to that in a little bit. And so the thing that I think you could also, that's all clear and on its face. But there's another layer that if you want to take it there, and this might be my preferred version of this movie because it's kooky, or more gross, which is he actually goes on a killing spree. He actually kills Paul Allen. He murders all those people. He kills the sex worker, and he has a closet full of, dead bodies and that model's head in this refrigerator. Because on the other hand, you have to remember, we never run into any of those people again after, we see them. So they never directly contradict through any physical evidence. It's just through kind of rumor and hearsay. Because whenever he goes back to clean up his mess, it's not like there's, a living space in there. Instead, everything's been freshly painted. The walls are white. There's paint literally in these rooms. And there's a woman who's kind of reading his mail. Oh yeah, did you hear about us in the Times? No. Yes, I meant yes. I read about this in the Times. I didn't put anything in the Times. Like, you're a crazy, I know who you are, and I'm here cleaning up your mess. You could take it there, because from that point on, he runs into that lawyer who's trying to play it off. And if you were to say that he killed all these people, and I think there is a fantasy in this version that I'm talking about, this alternate, less obvious, or at least less promoted version within the story itself, I think he still snaps and goes into a fantasy land that starts with the ATM. When the ATM starts talking to him, right? Feed me a stray cat. And then he literally grabs a cat and starts feeding it into and he pulls his gun out to shoot the cat. And then the lady walks up, and then he goes on this other killing spree where he's shooting cops and blowing up their cars. That's all clearly fantasy. And that part, I think, is a disassociation in this version that I'm talking about. And what I find interesting about this version is that it's effectively saying that these guys can get away with murder. And they can't even confess it themselves because everyone's covering for them. They operate at such a high level that the lawyers are there telling them, no. I saw Paul Allen, last 10 days ago in London, had dinner with him twice. Now I'm going to go talk to Ed Towers, if that's a real person. I think it's this version of reality that these guys can do whatever they want. There's the old, joke about dead hookers in the closet, and call your lawyer to clean it up or call a fixer. And I think they're effectively saying that actually can happen. And they can get away with it to the extent that they themselves don't even know that they're doing it. They're hiding it from themselves.
That it's interesting you say that, because I do know, have seen stuff online, and I think you have too, of like how they shot this. Was like, okay, well, how they shot this, some scenes at least, like with a that first scene with Willem Dafoe when he comes in, the detective, when he comes in to interview Bateman, they shot it with multiple different attitudes. So they shot it once where the director told him, Willem, interview him like you know he did it. And then another one, interview him like you don't know he did it. Another one where you think he might have done it, but you're not sure, and so you're holding back. And then they stitched it all together so that you see these moments of him. It's not like he's acting like, that was an interesting response. Okay. It's the entirety of the interview is, I know he did it. Or the entirety of the interview is, I don't think that he did. And then they had the choice in post to make it whatever it needed to be, so that us as a viewer, we don't really know, it's cut together so that it's to fool us too. We don't know what Detective Kimball really thinks, and then he has lunch with him, and then you're like, okay, he totally knows, that was like a different shooting. But so they take these moments, and I'm pretty sure they did that in other moments in the film too, where they shot it with different perspectives, but the entire thing, an entire scene or whatever, to mostly confuse us, because in the last shot, it didn't seem like he was accusatory at all, but now he's very accused. Okay, but now he's like not interesting. And so I totally could see that being the case, where now you and I are having this discussion of like, is this real? Is this not real? Does he know, does she know? It's now a discussion, and it's never explained. And I thought that was like super brilliant to shoot it like that. 'Cause then you don't have to direct moments for an actor. You just give them, you have this piece of information he doesn't know you have, or you don't have any information. You're just gathering, whatever. And then you just take that scene in the direction that it would go, it's pretty cool.
That's so cool. And two things that makes me think, one is that's why you get Willem Dafoe. It's because, you can get him in a room and he can, at the drop of a hat, play it, 10 different ways if you ask him to. Like, I'm sure they could have said, now play it like you're attracted to him and you're actually hitting on him. And he could play that. He could, with those same dialogue, he could play that, because that's just, he's one of the best ever. And I think that's maybe also why Willem Dafoe takes that kind of role, because he likes more art house, indie, crazy stuff. He tends to shy away from more mainstream stuff, and that it doesn't get more mainstream than a detective in like 3 scenes investigating a murder. But if you tell him, we're going to play this very crazy, and suddenly he's like, you know what, the story's obviously interesting, and my role now becomes even more interesting. I can do this. And then the other thing I had heard, this is maybe the only other tidbit I know about this film, is something like one of the other actors was confused about what they were making. Like I want to say it was maybe Josh Lucas. He was shooting some of these scenes, or maybe Justin Theroux. And the lineup in this film is crazy talented. And he was just like, I don't know what we're doing. Like Christian Bale is acting really weird. And I don't know why. And so I don't know if they were communicating everything to everyone in order to get some really genuine weird reactions to Christian Bale's performance, because he is so unbelievably good and weird. And that smile is so creepy, and just kind of plastered onto his face like a mannequin. I don't know, but I do find it interesting, right? Like there's a lot of interpretations to your point, that they don't make it clear one way or another. They kind of let you walk away with, he seems capable, and the horror on Jean's face when she's going through his calendar or notebook, and seeing all his obsessive thoughts kind of drawn out on the page, is painting a whole other picture, because she's genuinely shocked at what she's looking at. It's not like doodles. It feels like something very personal to her, as she's looking at these graphic images of women being sexually tortured. I don't know how to interpret any of that necessarily, but I love that it creates a real conversation about these kinds of people that exist in our culture. To what extent they exist, we don't really know. But we know, there's clear Wall Street types that have a lot of money and power. I mean, that's almost synonymous in, a capitalist society. I mean, probably synonymous in any society ever, but certainly just as much in ours. And those guys, make crazy bank. Yeah, but sorry, if you want to jump in and add your own thought there.
No, I love the idea about, I don't know what they did in that regard, but I love the idea that they might have done that. Like, that's a cool way to shoot a film where, you don't give the actors all of the information, because they're not supposed to have it anyway. It's hard to forget, it's hard to forget something that So don't tell the secretary anything, the woman who plays the secretary anything. Don't tell the detective anything, right? In fact, only give them the lines that they need for that scene, like that. They don't need to read the entire script. Like, how cool is that? That's pretty freeing, I would imagine, as an actor. Like, think about it, like if you read an entire script and the outcome, it's harder to then go in and perform like you don't. I'm not saying that you can't. Like, there's plenty of actors that can. I mean, they all do, because they usually read entire scripts and stuff, of course. But it seems like that's a better way to film, right?
Yeah, more genuine, right? You're in the moment. You're playing the scene as it's written because you haven't experienced tomorrow yet. Why would you go and pretend or have that in your head about where this is all going? I don't know. It can be a benefit either way, of course, just depending on the kind of actor, the kind of story, blah, blah, blah. But with the right story like this, it might make the most freeing experience for your performers, for sure. Yeah, it's inspired if that's, exactly how they were doing it, though. Pretty cool.
Very cool.
I think, yeah, I don't know. I'll run through a couple of other notes. Those weren't necessarily notes, but just thoughts running around in my head. Oh, and just as a general overview, my first viewing of this was very I didn't know what I was exactly getting into, because I'm familiar with certain images of him in the raincoat with blood on his face. I think I confused that with Dexter because he has kind of similar iconography. And then experience some of those scenes of him talking about Huey Lewis and Whitney Houston. It's just this is the coolest thing, because he's got this Casey Kasem voice that he's kind of walking you through the backstory of some of these bands and what it means to them as performers and us as listeners. It's so kooky and really, really fun. But I think the first thing that drew me in was the opening is really cool and interesting of them in the restaurant. But then we go to his apartment, and that's really cool. On the cinematography level, what jumped out at me was the hallway shot as we're pushing in. This is normal. You can either go super wide in a hallway on your lens choice so that you can get a really nice sense of parallax and movement. But they weren't really super wide on that. They were, I would say, a medium. And if you're going to do that, you're kind of losing the context of your scene. And the way they compensated that was move closer to the wall. And so they composed towards the left side of the wall so that now we have all these picture frames. We're pushing. We can feel the parallax, and we can create more depth that way. It's a more interesting shot and gives you a sense of location a lot stronger. And then, of course, it also allows for you to push around that corner a lot easier. And so just really smart, composition depending on what you're trying to accomplish in the shot. And then they move directly into his facial care routine in the morning, which is so good. This is his presentation to the world. It's his mask. And to me, this is very simple, direct symbolism. He's peeling the mask off at the end of the sequence as he tells us who he really is, right? He's empty. I simply am not there. I have all the makings of a human being, but there's actually nothing underneath it all. And he's doing this as he's peeling the mask off. it's so literal. It's so direct of him being honest about who he is as he's taking the mask off. That's beautiful. And it's not trying to be overly clever. It's just him putting on his daily mask and then revealing to the audience who he actually is. I love that. And Patrick himself imagines himself as like this edgy killer. But really, he loves really basic shit, right? Pop music. And you can't get a good dinner res. He does no real work. As he's listening to Huey Lewis and Phil Collins and the other guy in the limo. I forget, Simply Irresistible, whoever that guy is. Yeah. And I love as he's talking about Whitney Houston, he's getting mocked for liking and owning Whitney Houston CDs. And it's so good because, okay, so Detective Kimball comes in to investigate the Paul Allen murder, right? And he's pretending to be working. He's on the phone. He just grabs the phone and starts only talking superficially. He's talking about like tipping and etiquette in restaurants. And then Kimball sits down. He's like, I hope I didn't interrupt anything important. He's like, oh, no. Just, planning business deals and mergers. And he just completely, lying. And he's the worst liar ever. And it's just, this guy's pretending to be this important person, but we never in the entire film see him do any work whatsoever. Like anything that he actually does is only superficial, which I think is another, hat tip to the opinion about Wall Street as a whole. Like they're not contributing anything to America or to the world or to society. It's only superficial. It's only a money-making scheme. I don't know that that's literally the case. There's a really strong argument that it isn't literally the case, but to a large degree, it's become the bread and butter of those guys is to not actually contribute much to the world. It's just to shuffle around money and then take their cut. It's kind of weird and funky, and I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole in terms of personal opinion, but I think that's the opinion of this story, is that they contribute nothing to the world. It's all superficial. And so Kimball sits down, and what does he do? He insists on getting the detective a drink. Against his wishes. Kimball doesn't want a drink, but he said, no. I'm going to get you a drink and bring it in. So what's the topic of discussion? He asked for like the second time. And it's this pointless act to make himself feel good that has actually nothing to do with Kimball feeling better about himself or feeling, being treated nicely. It's only what he insists on other people, which is just carte blanche for his life. Like whatever I want to do is what's going to be done, and that's going to be the good thing. You can see the way he talks to like that model in the club. Ask me something. And it's like he doesn't want to engage in anything to do with her. And we see that later on in the film a number of times. He's the sex worker, right? He's telling her who she is and what she's drinking and to drink up. And the moment she actually asks him something, because he seems to want to engage about his life and how rich he is and how much money he has. She asks him, like, how much did this apartment place? Well, I'll tell you the truth, Christie, that's none of your business. But, I'll tell you, it costs a lot. Like he's telling her to shut up and only ask and engage in the way he's telling her to be an ornament in his life, effectively, which again is still a very strong opinion being inserted into this world. And so whenever, the detective goes to leave, to rewind back to that, he says, I have an appointment at, Four Seasons with Cliff Huxtable. He's not a very good liar. Cliff Huxtable is a fictional character in a sitcom. And then the detective points out that Four Seasons is like way uptown or whatever. And he's like, oh no, they have another one here. Like as if you could insert a new Four Seasons into anywhere and no one know about it.
Right.
He's a terrible liar. And then later in the film, and this kind of circles back to his obsession with pop music and his presentation of himself. Detective Kimball says that he likes Huey Lewis. He's like, do you like these guys? But now Patrick says, no, he doesn't like that kind of music. And that Huey is too black sounding for him, which is supposed to be like some big turnoff to, I guess, a Wall Street guy who then goes on in one of the next scenes to wax on about Whitney Houston. This guy doesn't know who he is. He doesn't care. It's only all this superficial stuff that just gets reinforced in all these weird, strange, discombobulated ways, which strangely a perfect through line for who this guy is. It's beautiful. It's weird, and there's so many ways to interpret it. But I think the only true way is to denote it's superficial and only concerned with who's in front of him, and has very little to do with what he thinks of himself. To the extent that it does have to do with him, it's about what someone else is able to do that he isn't. That's why he kills Paul Allen, because he himself can't get a res at Dorsia.
Yeah.
Paul Allen does. He kills him. Then he says, now try to get a reservation at Dorsia. What? That's your big
God.
rub? Oh.
Yeah.
And then, it's just, I don't know. I think it's a beautiful, crazy world that's full of judgment and full of seething contempt, even as it looks like it's celebrating it. And that's clever filmmaking, to let him. And this, I don't know how well our society is at this anymore. There's just not too many times you'll see someone indulge all these things on screen without really tipping the hat too strongly that it's a judgment. Like, she lets, him go and have sex with all kinds of people, and we see him engaging in sex as he's actually admiring himself. Right in the mirror, he's flexing it, and it's just him appreciating himself, and celebrating his own sexuality. That it's like, do you even like women? I mean, obviously he doesn't. They're just objects in his life. But I love this approach to filmmaking because it's asking a lot of the audience to understand. And I can imagine 75% of people who saw this in the theater walked out hyper confused and pissed off, until someone else starts explaining to them, like, this is all satire. Like, this is all mockery. Like, oh. And then once that light bulb comes on, they probably love it. And they're like, they appreciate the genius behind it. But I can imagine, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's so obvious on its face that everyone got it. I have a hard time believing that. I don't
know.
Me as a 20-year-old walking into this movie, I would have been like, what the hell is going on here? And just mad confused. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's all brilliant stuff. I don't have much to add. It's I when I saw it before, I remember thinking, what did I just watch? But I wasn't mad about it. I was intrigued. It left me questioning things, and I think that's the point, I think it also asks a lot of the viewer, because it asks the viewer to feel something. It doesn't actually, it makes you feel something. And that something hopefully is disgust and disdain and like, I'm pretty happy that I'm not a part of that world. But if not, you don't feel that, then maybe you should ask yourself some other questions, kind of thing. And maybe that's what those people who might have been mad, maybe that's why, because maybe they weren't feeling like, oh, this is terrible and this guy is awful and whatever. I don't know. I don't know what the purpose is necessarily of the film either, other than just to, I don't even think the purpose is to shine a light on anything. I literally think it's just, I'm going to tell a story of a psychopathic maniac, but then make you question whether this actually happened or whether this is something that could happen in your mind, even, because we could let Wes, if you let your mind go down any rabbit hole, down like a crazy rabbit hole, especially as a guy. I think the guys are, you have more testosterone, you're more prone to violent outbursts. It just is. It just is the fact. If you as a male let your mind go down like crazy rabbit holes, it might do something, pretty aggressive, not in reality, but like, in your mind. And I think this is just calling to light something like that. And I think all of us want to feel also more important than we actually are, and more like necessary to the world than we actually are, right? And that's what I feel like Patrick is the embodiment of everyone is here to serve me. You know, everyone from my secretary to my driver to the guy at the front desk. Like, it doesn't matter. Everyone is here for me. And how dare you not give me a seat or a table at Dorsia, you know, like, and if anybody else can, then I'm going to kill them because they don't belong at my table. Sure. I'm super important as well. You know, I'm very important. Just the world doesn't know it, you know? So I just have to let them know it. I think it's a crazy film in that regard, but really kind of like necessary, to just let you and I have a discussion about this kind of thing of like, you know, how extreme can my mind get? Pretty freaking extreme. I got to be honest, you know, like I think all of us probably could. So anyway, and then just giving, I think also maybe it's just an outlet, a creative outlet for these people who made it, you know? I know that, I also know that like the film didn't have a very big budget at all, and it almost didn't get made. But Christian Bale said, no, I want to do this. And he fought to do, he is one of the reasons why this film actually got made, because it was very, like there wasn't a lot of money for it. I need to look it up. I'm not going to spread rumors, but I want to say it was just in the like 6 digits. Like it wasn't even like $1 million or something. It was like very little money, and he almost did it for nothing because he just wanted to get it made. And the writer / director, what was her name?
Mary Harron.
Mary Harron. Yeah, she like was like, no, I want him to do it. That, you know, everybody fought for this movie to be made.
Wow.
And at a shoestring budget, and they did it, and only because. Maybe not because they needed to make a statement, but because they just wanted to make something that was wild. Like, who knows, you know? So anyway, that's crazy, so cool. Crazy movie. Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, we all need a champion, like to get us over the line or to get us where we're trying to go. You can't really do it on your own. And more often than not, it takes someone else championing you. Like, you need a champion. I need a champion. Someone that, maybe it's not even just vouching for you, but just believes in you enough to get you the resources or over the hump, to get noticed. And that's so cool that he fought with her to get this thing done, because it is wild. It does stand alone in American, you know, cinema. It's just its own thing. And I don't know what else I would really liken it to. I mean, I guess, you know, other serial killer type of movies, but this is playing in such a different field because it's sampling from so many ideas. It's sampling from Psycho. It's sampling from Wall Street, and it's not blinking.
The Shining.
The Shining, you know, it's playing in all these interesting sandboxes in order to tell a completely new story, a completely new idea. And yeah, I mean, I definitely identify with the that what you're talking about, the dark fantasy side of things. Like, I mean, this past week, I have a neighbor who refuses to turn off his subwoofer, and I've begged him. I've literally begged him. And this week, it was just kind of a breaking point where I was feeling very Patrick Bateman. Like, I was like indulging all these dark fantasies and feeling myself snap. And I literally just sent him a big text like, man, this is actually ruining my life. I know that sounds crazy, but it's literally, my blood pressure's up. I feel like my heart's going to pop. I have so much stress and anxiety because you will not turn off your subwoofer. And if there's any way I can convince you to do that, it would change my life. He didn't respond. And he turned it down, but it's still not off. I don't know. I don't get what drives people to do what they do sometimes. regardless of how it impacts other people. But this is the world we live in. This is, and so I look at a Bateman, and I'm like, this guy has everything at his feet. And of course, none of it, is good enough. And it's just reflected so beautifully through all these tiny little flourishes. Like everyone's business card says vice president. Like how many vice presidents do they have?
Yeah. So good.
His
so
fiance
good.
says that his father practically owns the company, which also tells you he didn't earn his way there. This was, complete nepotism. And probably the case for everyone else there. Like this is probably a bunch of Nepo babies who never had to work a day in their life, and they're still not working a day in their life. And their biggest concern is, oh my God, at the end of the film, it's one of my favorite lines. I forget who it is, Josh Lucas's character. And he's like, where do we have a res tonight? Like, I'm not even hungry. I just want to make sure we have a good reservation. And it's like, he wants to eat even though he has no appetite. Like, if that doesn't really scream at all of what this thought is about, these people, it's perfect. I mean, even when he's getting caught, it's all about status. And he's getting caught dragging that Paul Allen's body out, and he's throwing it in the trunk, and he runs into Lewis. And Lewis says, "Oh my God, whose bag is that? Who's designed that?"
Yeah, where'd you get that bag? I was like, what? This guy is. Now that you say that, I might take back my comment about maybe it's not a
fiction.
Maybe it's not calling. Yeah. Maybe it's not like maybe it is bringing to light this whole American dream kind of like gotta have more, kind of mentality, because all of the guys and girls, like everybody in this, they're all the worst. They're all cheating on each other, like the clip you showed. They're all, taking, massive amounts of drugs just to get through the day. They're all, up each other's butts. And their own, like want to get reservations when they're not even hungry, and comparing cards. It's just, and how much money they make and where they live and how much nicer Paul Allen's place is than his. And it's all stuff that in the end does not matter. Right. But it doesn't matter because they cannot have enough of it. Like there's no amount of stuff or money or apartment quality or card quality that would be enough. And I feel like that is a huge thing in American society. I mean, that opens a whole nother conversation of like, cost of living increases and stuff, but like, is it enough? Is it where is enough? And we just have this society where it's never enough, and it hasn't gotten any better since that movie came out. It's got worse in a lot of ways.
That's so interesting. Two thoughts. One, a few of the women are bad, but then there's also like several that are super beholden. Jean is the sweetest person in the movie.
Oh my God.
And not all the guys are bad either. At a minimum, I think Detective Kimball seems to be okay, assuming he isn't in on covering up the actual murders. Assuming that, he seems like an okay guy, but otherwise I think all the men are dirtbags. And then a couple of, and inversely, like one or two of the women seem normal. And Courtney is a rough one. That's the one he's having the affair with. She's so drugged up, and it's hard to tell how much of that is her choice versus she's just kind of being fed these things, or maybe she hates herself so much that she's doing those things. But you have all these other women that they're just, I don't know to what degree they're putting themselves in the line of fire is questionable. Jean doesn't seem to want to be a part of it. So I would say at a minimum, Jean and Kimball seem like the perfect redeemable characters. And then
that's true.
You could debate one way or the other, the sex workers. They obviously don't deserve murdering, but how much are they complicit? And she knows the rule is to not go to someone's apartment, and money tempts her. So is that a commentary about us as a society and a culture that we know things that we shouldn't be doing, but because we feel like we have to play this game, we then therefore, go against our better judgment and put ourselves in, bad situations. Like maybe I don't want to work for Amazon, but maybe I don't feel like I have other options. And therefore I go into these bad conditions. And it's an interesting conversation that I'm not trying to put my finger on the thumb. Anyway, I think that's about all of my ramblings. The final thing that kind of stuck out at me was you get to the end and it's Reagan on TV. He's talking about Iran-Contra, which was a massive scandal. And ultimately it was another version of destroying Americans' quality of life through drugs and gun running. I mean, that's a really, really foul piece of American, and that, you know, that's a Reagan thing. And how do you, they're discussing, what do you think about that? This guy could just sit there and lie. He could sit there and just, how easily can, and he's judging Reagan, you know, this guy who's living all the excesses made possible in that era. And yet he has the denial, you know, to go and start judging other people for, you know, their lies and whatever. It's an interesting aspect of the film. But it also further paints the idea that this is firmly set in the 80s. And I don't know what to really make of that, other than it's a commentary about maybe the greater American culture. This was a culture of the way we treat our own society, our own people, to have power, and the way you treat those without power seems to be the running commentary and theme in the film, and that just kind of further underscores it. Yeah. Wild. Great film. Glad you dug it too. Yeah, first time viewing it, and super glad we finally got. You hadn't seen this movie before? Very first time. Yeah. Holy cow. Yeah. You need to watch it like 3 or 4 more times. Yeah, I think so. This is probably like my 4th time watching it. Oh my God. At least 3rd. At least. So, wow. Okay. Interesting. So good. Cool. Nice. What are you going to recommend this week? Well, I brought him up earlier, and I gotta say, cause I don't know why it speaks to me. He speaks to me so much, but I'm going to recommend an actor that I brought up earlier, Antony Starr. Like, I just finished The Boys final season, and I just cannot get over the performance of this guy. I just absolutely, like, it boggles my mind, honestly. I love it. I absolutely love what he does with his face, his facial expressions in that show, where he can communicate exactly what he's feeling by barely doing anything. And the emotion also, I believe everything that he's putting out there 110%. I'm not saying that the show itself is the best show in the world. I think that there's moments where it's like, there's, you know, too much exposition, and it's like, oh, okay, that's a TV show kind of thing that you're doing. I can tell. I see through all of that, you know, but there is never a moment he's on screen where I'm just not completely enthralled in his character and who he is and like what he's putting out there. So I'm just going to recommend him as an actor. I cannot wait to see other stuff that he can do, because it's so funny. I never watched The Boys because I saw him, and I'm like, what is this? Like, this blonde guy who's supposed to be like, what am I looking at here? And throughout the course of his craziness throughout that show, I just completely fell in love with him as an actor. And I think he puts on a clinic every time he's there. And it's just crazy because it's a show. It's not like, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just going to recommend Antony Starr. Yeah. Have you started going through his library? No, I have not. I just finished the show. Like, I was watching nothing else but The Boys for the last couple of weeks just to catch up, because I started watching it, and then all of a sudden I was like hooked. And they're long episodes. They're, an hour long, 50 minutes long. And so it took me forever to get through it all, and a few late nights, but yeah, it did. So now I'll start going through his catalog. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm on the fence. I think I'm going to recommend Challengers. It's a film by Luca Guadagnino. Probably way mispronouncing that. The guy who, directed Call Me By Your Name, and a handful of others that I really like. And Challengers I think fits really well with American Psycho, just from the standpoint that it's not necessarily obvious what it's about. It's doing some weird, interesting things. It's a really fun experience. And the soundtrack, once it gets to the end of the film, and I see that it was scored by Atticus and Reznor, it was just like, oh, that makes so much sense. The soundtrack is so funky, and it adds so much to the experience. It'll make you laugh. The score will make you laugh, and it's so good. The performances are dynamite. Like, I love seeing Zendaya in this kind of role, and her 2 co-stars are freaking phenomenal. I fell for it. It's a great experience. I don't know how many more times I'll watch it, but I don't know. I love golf and tennis films, and all that stuff is really, really fun to me. And so if you haven't seen Challengers, check that out whenever it hits streaming. I think it's already out of the theaters now. Anyway, so stay tuned for next week. So we're going to take a look at the new film. I think it's a Marvel film, Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm pretty sure we did Deadpool 2, so why not keep the train rolling here and see Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds do their thing together. So stay tuned for Deadpool and Wolverine. Go see that in a theater near you. And if you are enjoying the show, don't forget, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to cover, things you find interesting, and you can leave a comment on this episode at thepestlepodcast.com/American Psycho.
And our quote of the day is from Oliver Stone. Well, first of all, you have to make the character strong so that people can follow that. And then hopefully that character can integrate with the background of the social situation that people can recognize.
Obviously, I like pulling from Oliver Stone just because Wall Street, that's, his film. But when I saw that quote, I was like, that's so perfect. Of Patrick Bateman is a super strong character, right? He's a psycho. He fantasizes about killing people, and he's also way over the top about his public persona. And so whenever you present such strong characteristics, then all the subtleties can pop out whenever we're watching his reaction about business cards, and seeing him get really uncomfortable and start to sweat bullets. Like, that's such a great idea whenever you're creating a character. And yeah, I just like that as a writing note. Oh man, there was one other note that I forgot to get to. It's super fast. But if you want to comment on the quote, by all means, I'll pull up the quick note here in a second.
No.
Nice. The only other note that I had was cinematography, and this is lighting. Whenever he's on the phone with Pumpkin and she's kind of doped up and she's in her bed, lighting her on her bed, that's a flat shot. Like, we're overhead looking straight down at her, or almost straight down at her, laying in her bed. There's no separation between her and her background, right? That's a flat shot, as flat as it gets. So how do you create dimension on that? Well, what they did, of course, was they added side light. They lit it entirely from the side. And now you have all this motivated window light that's creating some nice highlights on the right side of the frame. And even that, they're still breaking it up with props so that, it's kind of speckled in there. It's not just one big highlight. And then to the left, we're able to create all these shadows, still with a few specks of highlight. And you can't always do that depending on your project. But if it's a drama, something that you can dramatize the look of, adding, that's one way to break up. Like, if you get stuck with someone up against a wall, nightmare, right? As a cinematographer, you're like, don't do that. Well, if we're going to put them on the wall, then let's get next to the wall and shoot, down. That way we have some depth still. But if you're shooting directly into the wall, guess what? Side light it. Now you can create a lot of interesting dimension, maybe throw something in the foreground. Anyway, I thought that was a really beautiful shot that can be really tricky from a cinematography standpoint. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Wait. No, you're good. Gotta say it. I love it. That's brilliant. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed our discussions on American Psycho. Yeah, it's Genius. Wild. What a movie. Yeah. So thanks for joining us. Hopefully that you got something out of this. Please share us with your friends, subscribe, review us wherever you can. It all helps a lot. If there's a film that you'd like to see us pick apart, please share it with us. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll get to it. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.